The other week, I posted a poll in my private Facebook group about what is it that you enjoy about tango the most. And the options were connection with your partner, musicality, the social aspect, the community, or the actual movement of the dance. And overwhelmingly, the number one answer was connection with the partner. The number two answer was musicality. And we ended up having a discussion that week about connection because I thought, well, it makes sense that that's what people would say. We talk about connection all the time. It's such a commonly used word that in a way it's become void of meaning sometimes. It's unfortunate because it is such an important aspect of the dance. But yet, what is it that we really mean when we say connection? What are we describing? That's where it wasn't as easy to really define what we are actually talking about. And by the way, if you want to join my private Facebook group, so you can also share your experience about tango and participate in the weekly polls that I post, you can click the link in the show notes. Would love to have you. Before we launch into this discussion, I wanted to let you know that at the end of this month, I will be at the Albuquerque Tango Festival for the first time. I'm very excited to be dancing there. It will actually be my first year anniversary of getting married, which is kind of funny because how typical of tango dancers to do that kind of thing. You just celebrate your wedding anniversary by dancing more tango. I'm okay with that. I am absolutely on board with that. I am glad that I am with a partner who's okay with that too. So I hope I see you there. Let me know if you'll be dancing there. Would be nice to see you face to face. So when I'm talking about connection in tango, I always try to point out that this is a physical experience that is hard to describe perhaps, but it's experienced on a very physical levels, like the idea of the butterflies in your stomach. This is a phrase that we use to describe a very particular physical sensation that doesn't necessarily have a concrete sign. You know, when you see somebody, you don't necessarily see butterflies flying out of their stomach, but we all know what it means. There is kind of this very experiential and tactile quality to this concept. It's not just poetic and metaphorical. I think as tango dancers, especially when we first start and we get our first experience of this very deep, almost mystical type of intimacy with another person on the dance floor, we get into this mindset that we're chasing after something very ephemeral and we're kind of always waiting for it to happen again. If we don't get it, it feels like we're not really succeeding in tango or we're not getting what we want. So this episode, I want to make it a bit more concrete because even though obviously we're never going to get to the bottom of what connection really means when we're talking about tango, but I think there's so many elements, so many variables that contribute to us experiencing connection on a deeper, more profound level more often, that talking and attempting to describe what we're feeling, I think will help us understand a little bit more about ourselves so that it gives us a little bit more power and volition to do something towards that end, towards creating opportunities for deeper, more meaningful connection more often. So, how would you describe connection to someone who doesn't dance tango? I would love for you to think about that and maybe let me know later once you come up with something, or maybe you already have it. So post it in the comments or send me a DM on my social at I'm So Tango, IMSO Tango. When I posed this question to my community in our weekly live, so I do a weekly live banter in that group that I keep mentioning on Fridays. So we had a discussion, and one of the first comments was, well, it's experiential, it's not descriptive, meaning that there is no way that you can really describe this. It's something that you have to experience. So I thought, well, yes, that's true. That's true. There's nothing that you can say about it to someone else that will give them that experience. The same way that you can't describe to someone what it's like to ride a bike and have them actually know it until they ride a bike themselves. So that's true. However, there are certain things about connection and the experience of connection that I feel are worthwhile mentioning from the perspective of what actually happens to the body, to your partner's body, when you experience this very deep sense of connection with them. When you are in an embrace, you're involved in this feedback loop with another person where you're connected to them and you're feeling their body in a very particular way. There are all of these different things happening in your nervous system, your chemistry changes. When you're dancing with someone and you guys are breathing together and you're stepping together and there's this touch between you, of course those things are playing a part. And how many times have you been in a really bad mood and then you go dancing and you feel much better? It's not just that you stop thinking about the thing that's upsetting you and you started thinking about something else. Yes, that's a part of it, but there's a chemical change. There is a physical change that happens. And I think it's very much because when our body synchronizes with another body, it's much easier for us to relax, to let go, to start breathing deeply again, and our whole system relaxes. There is also this phenomenon that if you hold hands with someone for a while, or if you have physical contact with them for a while, your heart rate will also begin to synchronize. So that's such an amazing, beautiful fact about the organism. And it's also an amazing metaphor, right, for what connection really is. It's this coming together of two individual wholes, right, whole beings, that when you put those two together, it helps both individuals to synchronize and has a cascade-like effect on their nervous system, their lymphatic system, their circulatory system, their mood, their emotional state, their outlook on life even. Now, recently, I actually got to see a part of a Paralympic sport that is a race for athletes who are blind, and they have to run with a guide. So they are basically lined up side to side, and they're somehow connected on that side of the body. So the arms are maybe, I think they're holding hands maybe, or somehow they're tied, but they basically have to run together, and the guide has to help the runner run towards the finish line, and then the runner actually has to cross the finish line first. So they have to coordinate that the guide does not outrun the actual athlete who's competing. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like tango. This is exactly what tango dancers have to do. That you have to synchronize your movements with another person, moment by moment, constantly evolving, constantly improvising to the music. And the kind of intimacy that fosters, that's the kind of connection that we're really talking about when we're talking about connection in tango, right? It's not just about connection to the music or connection to the community or connection to yourself. This is a very physical experience of connection that we stumble into when we dance tango. The kind of connection that we might expect only to experience someone that we've known for a really long time. I know that for me, it was in my mind for a long time that the person that you're most intimate with are the people that you're supposed to know. They're supposed to be someone who has earned your trust over years of friendship, and physical intimacy only comes after some time of verbal exchange and a lot of etiquette. That's kind of that was my perception of what this kind of connection, like how to access that kind of experience. Now, another way that I like to describe this experience of connection in tango, it's like yoga, but for two people. Typically, anyone who's done a little bit of yoga, and I think that also encompasses anyone who's done a little bit of Tai Chi or Qigong, you've done it long enough that you've had this experience of a flow state where you're sort of there observing yourself, but you're not so involved. And it's actually the movement itself that's kind of carrying you. Those states are, I would say, kind of like those nirvana states that are written about in the yogic texts, or when yoga teachers talk about the meaning of yoga, of joining the mind and the body and the cessation of thought. Those ideas, I think, are attempting to describe this state where you're just sort of out of time and you're at peace with what's happening, even if it's hard. And in yoga, especially in vinyasa style of yoga, where you move a lot and there's a constant flow, there's a lot of sweat and arduous exercise involved, where you're kind of pushed to your limits and you want to quit. And that's the point at which a lot of times we can access this magical state of flow, of fugue state, I call it, on a physical level. So in tango, that's what you get to experience, but with another person. And what I've noticed is it's actually easier to access those states with another person because you have to be more focused, I think. In yoga, I noticed in my own practice, there is a lot of opportunity to get distracted, and your mind can go somewhere else. You can tune out because it's just you, right? And you have to catch yourself. So the discipline in yoga, it takes a long time to develop that discipline of continuously bringing your mind back to your practice. But when you're dancing with another person, you kind of can't do that. You have to be really present. So tango actually allows for us to access those fugue states much easier. And it's common for people to talk about tango as a moving meditation. I've even heard many dancers say that they don't like meditation. They can't meditate, but when they dance tango, they feel like they're meditating. And I would say that probably there's something very interesting going on in the brain in terms of the brain wave states that we enter when we dance tango. And I bet if we could measure those things in the brain, that we probably would discover that it's very similar to some of the research that's been done on meditation, of the kinds of brainwave states that meditators enter when they go into deep meditation. So one day, I hope we have the means to study this, because I bet it would explain a lot of interesting things about tango and its impact, its effect on the nervous system in our bodies. Now, when I first started tango, I did not get any of this, okay? It's not something that's obvious. My first milonga that I attended, literally I looked at the dance floor and I was like, there's a bunch of people and they're just shuffling around in a circle. And this music, oh my God, I was like, this is circus music. It was so weird. It was so weird. I did not get it. And I really feel lucky that I even stuck around long enough, because it took a long time for me to feel any sort of magic. But when it did click, it was like a switch. And I've talked about it before. It was with this guy from New York who came to Dallas, and I swear to God, he looked like Fabio. And he had a white button-down shirt that was a little buttoned down too much, but in that awesome way. And whether that contributed to my level of connection with this guy, I don't know. But I remember taking the embrace with him, and something just opened up in my head. Like there was a whole other dimension of being that I tapped into. And of course, I thought he was my soulmate. I mean, what else are you going to think the first time you feel this? Of course, I was jealous when other dancers were dancing with him. Oh my gosh. Looking back on it, it's just so cute. In a way, it's because it was so new. Like, there's no other way to categorize that kind of experience. It feels so deep and so profound. So once I experienced it, I just went for it. It didn't matter what I had to do to get more of it. I would move continents, sell my possessions, and go to Buenos Aires on a one-way ticket so that I could have more of this experience. It's that profound. But until you feel it, it's sort of a mystery. And you know, even when I think about dancers entering into tango now, beginners, there's a lot of attrition in tango, right? We talk about all the time. Typically, you might have a group of people start at the beginning of the year and only 10% remain at the end of the year, and that's generous. People don't stick around. That's because the dance itself can be very confusing. It's very technical. It's tedious. The music is unfamiliar. But really, I think it's because people don't experience that level of connection early enough that sort of gives them a reason for why they should be suffering in the first place, right? Like when you feel it, then you're like, okay, I get it. It's worth it. It's worth the suffering. But until you feel it, it seems like an uphill battle all the time, with very little return. Now, it's common in tango to refer to this kind of experience as a tango high. And I would guess that when I was asking that poll question of what's important for you in the dance, and people said connection with the partner, I would guess that for most people, it's a synonym for the tango high. Like, that's why we go to dance. We want to feel that high. And I would say the tango high is at the extreme end of a spectrum. connection, like everything else in life, it's a spectrum of qualities. So you might have in your tango life, as you dance with different people through the years, you develop different levels of connection. When we're talking about this tango high experience that we're after, what are we really describing here? And I want to give some ways that I've thought about it. And so as I'm talking about it, I hope that gives you some ideas, because maybe you're going to go, oh yeah, I experienced that too. When I'm in that state, it's a very much like an out of body state. Sometimes it feels like I'm hovering above my body. The first time that happened, that was very alarming. And it literally felt like my consciousness was outside of my body, floating somewhere on the side, and I'm looking down at myself. That experience freaked me out the first time, but as I kept dancing, I realized that's just one of the types of experiences that you can have. Other times, I have this sensation that I can feel the space around and through my partner. So the way you feel space when you're just in your own body, like you can tell where things are spatially, you are not bumping into things because we have this proprioception quality. So sometimes when I am dancing with someone and our connection is this very, very flow state connection, it feels like I am feeling the space through my partner's body the same way, like their body is part of my body, and that I can sense their biology, their anatomy, their chemistry even, like it's just an extension of me. Now, it doesn't happen with everyone, this kind of connection, and it doesn't happen every time like with the same person. So even though I might have felt this really, really deep connection with someone, it's not guaranteed that the next time I'm going to feel the same way. And it's not also limited to tango. I really feel like this kind of experience is actually really familiar to people because it does exist in other places. When I've talked to people who do jiu-jitsu, for example, the way they describe what they experience when they are involved in combat with the other person, I don't know what you call it, sparring or rolling, when they are involved in that art of it, the words that they use and how they talk about it is very similar to how we talk about tango. And when I was exploring a lot of other dance forms like blues and fusion a few years ago, I actually have had some of my most profound fugue state experience with other people in a fusion dance setting where there is no agreed upon form that we're dancing. So fusion dance is literally getting together with a whole bunch of people from very different backgrounds of dance. It can be solo dance, ballet dancers, it could be swing dancers, hip hop dancers, ecstatic dancers, like there's not a defined form that you would dance with someone, but you just take the embrace and you allow things to happen. So it's not just tango that gives you that experience. But I think tango facilitates that experience and allows for it to happen more often because we dance multiple songs with the same person. So we take the embrace and we're in that embrace for 10 minutes. And then we're doing it over and over and over again in this very structured way, which I have found the more I live, the more I'm learning. The truth of this is that anything, if you want to grow anything, it needs structure. Tango has a lot of structure. And I think because of that structure, it actually increases the chances for experiencing this connection more often. I think because of this structure, tango is actually effective in all of these other ways for regulating our nervous system. For example, they have found that dancing tango is very helpful for people suffering from Parkinson's to alleviate their symptoms. And there's been some fascinating videos online that I've seen of someone who is very advanced in their symptoms of Parkinson's with a lot of tremoring. And then the music goes on, they take the embrace, and suddenly they're just walking without any difficulty and being very elegant and very smooth in their movement. It's quite amazing. So there's all of this chemistry that goes on inside of us, and the hormonal shift and the brainwave states that are occurring when we're dancing. And one thing that I've noticed for myself, and I'm really curious if others of you experience this, but the scientific term for this is synesthesia, and it basically means a blending of the senses where you either hear color or smell sound or you see sound. And I think it's actually more common than people might think. We just are not aware that we have this. But in tango, I noticed for myself, this is a very common experience, that when I dance, specifically as a follower, I typically will see different colors and shapes. And there's some sort of a virtual reality kaleidoscope happening inside my head when I'm dancing as a follower a lot of times. And to me, as I'm inside the experience, it makes total sense. But when I try to describe it or describe kind of what I'm seeing, it doesn't make any sense. So there are examples of this with other dancers, and perhaps I'm thinking tango dancers probably are prone to experiencing this, especially the ones who are really hooked in tango, because it feels like a very interesting experience to have. And sometimes to me, that's like what I'm after. I'm after experiencing that part of my brain and that part of my creativity, which is not a novel idea. Of course, when you dance, there's a part of you that really wants to express itself, right? And I think that fulfillment of expressiveness, of really getting to say what you want to say with your body, that's what we have to offer in terms of connecting to another person. So when I was talking about at the beginning how we get into this mindset of like, oh, I'm just going to wait here for the connection to arrive to me, which is something I did for a long time as a follower. You just sit there hoping that the person that asks you next jives with you and you get to feel that high. But we actually, as individuals, have a lot to offer. And one of those things that we offer is our desire to express, like our need to feel certain things and to go to certain places in our minds. Sometimes we forget that's really what it's about. I forget it. A lot of times I get carried away with the sort of the external polish of things, of looking a certain way, appearing a certain way, that's really what it's about, that's what other people want from me. Other people want me to look really good, to dress really hot, and to know a lot of figures and to execute things perfectly. But that's really not the case. When we're talking about connection, it's easy for us to talk about it in terms of what we get from other people, right? It's easy for me to experience it and think, oh, that connection that I feel, the source of that is that person right there. And then we get attached to dancing with particular people. But the reality is a lot of it is what we bring to the table. And I think that's what we do have a lot more say over. And so when we think about, let's put it into a very concrete sense of what is it that we bring our embrace, right? This idea of like, we have two arms and a body And when I step into embrace someone, I give my embrace to them. And through that embrace, I offer access to me, to my presence, to being in communion with me. Like those are things that I choose to bring to the table. You choose to bring that to the table. What does it mean to actually embrace someone? How are you supposed to hug them? And recently at the workshop with Horacio Godoy, he actually demoed this for me in such a simple way. We were talking about the quality of the embrace, and he just said, hug me. Just hug me, you know? And I hugged him, and I was like, and he said, yeah, the hugging is not about this. And he just pressed his inner arms around me, like squeezing me on the side with the inner part of his upper arm. So if you're watching me on video, I'm kind of showing it. So he was saying, it's not about squeezing somebody with your arms. It's about this embrace and holding someone with your hands. And he specifically pointed to that idea of the hands touching the other person. And frequently when I dance with some people, the hands are the most absent from the embrace because there's so much fear around the hands being too forceful, too much, especially for women. Women have a fear of squeezing their partner too much, you know? Or there can just be a static position of the hands where the hands don't do much except hold this very fixed shape. Because we're thinking about it as like, oh, this is a dance, this is tango. But if you think about it as like, okay, just imagine yourself hugging someone. Just hug them. There's no question in your mind about what to do with your hands. Your hands just go there. Think about holding a child. You know, you don't have that question of like, oh, is my hand supposed to go this way or that way? And I think that's what needs to come in to our awareness as a starting point for the embrace, as an opening, an invitation to connect with another person. In that space where you decide to take an embrace with someone, there are so many possibilities of how it could be, how it could feel. You could go into open embrace or close embrace. And with every person, it's going to be slightly different. So with some people, you end up resonating so closely. You move very similarly. It's like you understand each other's movement without ever having met. And that, I think, is the most amazing part of tango, when that you experience that. Like, how is that even possible that you just met this person, he's a stranger, she's a stranger, and yet it's like you're breathing from the same source and you can interpret each other's thoughts. And you know, it very rarely does it have to do with level. I know that maybe for some of you listening, you might have this idea like, oh, well, it's going to take years for me to be that kind of dancer, to provide that kind of experience to someone. I'm just a beginner. I don't know these things. But honestly, it's really not dependent on the level. There's some very advanced dancers that I've danced with that I feel no connection with. I feel sort of a vacuum of connection, let's say. And then there's been times where I take an embrace with a complete beginner and I'm immediately plugged into something bigger than myself. And it's a wonderful experience. So it really doesn't have to do with the level. I think it more has to do with, once again, sort of being open and realizing that you yourself are bringing something to the table, that you are offering something to someone else, rather than you're there to execute something for someone. You're there to perform and be perfect, and get your 5-star rating. I used to think that. I used to feel like, oh, if I just execute everything perfectly, that person will want to dance with me again, right? Like if I follow every ocho and I never lose my balance, and I don't take any more than I need, and I'm not too heavy, and I don't make them work too hard, and I am just exactly what they need me to be, then I will feel that connection, and it's guaranteed in the future as well. So I just need to make sure to tick off these boxes and connection, voila. But it just doesn't work that way. It does not work that way. I tried many times. At best, it's unpredictable when you follow that line of thinking. Sometimes it results in that kind of connection, and sometimes it really doesn't. So, one truth about this that we all have to take away always, no matter what time of tango life we're living, is that it's going to work with some people, it's not going to work with other people. Everybody's going to have a spectrum of connection in their tango life. I have people that I used to dance with that I don't dance with anymore because I don't connect with them anymore. But there is a kind of connection that is happening for a lot of dancers over time, is that you start connecting with people who become what a friend of mine calls your tango home. The tango home is the ultimate dance connection that every social dancer wants. It's those people that it doesn't matter how long you haven't seen each other. It doesn't matter if you dance very often, but when you do dance, it's always amazing. And it's that incredible feeling of coming home. It's like you never stop dancing. It's so magical, right? Like it's so rare for us in our daily life even to have someone, imagine like such a deep, deep friend that it doesn't matter how long it's been since you've talked, but the moment you talk, it's like it never stopped. There's that complete openness and total freedom to express yourself and just picking up where you left off, basically. And that's what it feels like with your tango home. And there are a number of people in my life that have been like that any time that I dance with them, I always have this very high level of connection. So I believe that the physicality of everything that happens with the connection, the mindset that I'm in when I take the embrace, the thoughts that are going through my mind as I dance, all of that is something that I choose to bring to the table. This is something that I'm using my will to offer. And the more I do that, the more ways I find to share openly within the dance from that perspective, the more often I experience that tango high, that level of magic that we call the tango connection. So, what is your experience of connection? I want to know what it's like for you when you dance tango. So share with me in the comments, send me your DMs. I love hearing from you. I hope I see you at Albuquerque Tango Festival. And until next week, ciao.